You're listening to Let's Talk Creation with Todd Wood and Paul Garner, the creation show where we learn, grow, and worship.
Well, welcome to another episode of Let's Talk Creation with Paul Garner and Todd Wood. I'm Paul Garner.
And I'm Todd Wood.
And as you can see, we are not on separate continents.
We are not.
Today.
We're in the same room.
We're in the same room. So I've come over to the States again, and we are here in the headquarters of Core Academy of Science. And we're recording an episode together.
Yep.
And the episode that we're going to be recording today is one of those episodes that is going to be of no controversy whatsoever. I say that, of course, with some sarcasm because we're going to be talking about a topic that has created a huge amount of contention among creationists. And it concerns the skeleton of Lucy, a partial skeleton that was excavated in the 1970s. And it's become an icon of human evolution. And in order to help us talk about it, we actually have here a cast of Lucy. We have a cast of the skeleton. So Todd, why don't you begin just by telling us exactly what this cast is?
Yeah. So there's different ways of reproducing fossils, right? So you can do like scanning.
Mm-hmm.
Nowadays, you can sort of get a 3D scanner and make a really high resolution scan. And then you can go to your 3D printer or that teenager at church that does your 3D printing for you, depending on your situation. And you can make a printout, a plastic representation of the fossil. This is not that.
Okay.
This is where the actual museum has gone in and made like a cast of the fossil and then made a resin copy of the original fossil. So the difference here, I've got some examples here of two things where I can show you how they're different. So.
Okay.
On the right here is my trusty dusty 3D print of this particular cranium. This is a cranium also from Kenya. This is from East Africa. Quite a distance from where Lucy was from, but sort of in the same region of the world. And this is the 3D print with really fine filament, and it picks up a lot of detail. It's pretty tremendous. If you want to do proportions and sizes and things like that, this is very good.
Okay.
But you can see this is dramatically different. Sure. Picks up all the cracks and the little scratches, even on the surface of the fossil here. So this is way different and way better. So as far as actual copies of fossils go, 3D scanning is fine, but casting is better.
Okay.
So this cast is a cast of a cast. So Lucy here, this particular skeleton is a cast of a cast. This is pretty common when you're dealing with really fragile, really valuable fossils. They will make a cast and then they'll make another cast off of that original cast.
Okay.
And the reason is the molds don't last forever. You only get a certain number of casts out of a mold. And so you have to keep making new molds as time goes on. And that means, if you've got an original, real, valuable fossil, you're constantly having to make molds off of it, which means you're constantly handling it, which means danger of damage. Nobody wants that. So they make master casts of the fossil, and then they make casts off the cast. So I've got a second generation cast here, but it's still better than a 3D scan, and it's way better than lousy little photographs. You can pick these pieces up and examine all the different angles and look at all the different details. And because it's a nice cast, you can see all the different surface details on these things. It's really remarkable.
Yeah.
So that's what we've got. We've got a cast of the Lucy skeleton.
Yeah. So it's not a 3D scan. It's not a sculpted copy. It's a cast of a cast.
Mm-hmm.
So we get lots of nice detail, which is great. So we're going to be talking about some of these bones. I kind of want to sort of dive in and already begin to talk about this, but I think to set the context, we probably ought to say something about the background. So the discovery, the excavation of this skeleton. So what can you tell us about that?
Sure. Don Johanson is credited, the team he was working with is credited with discovering and excavating the original Lucy skeleton in 1974.
Okay.
The first bones that they found when they first found the skeleton, they recovered parts of the skull here, little fragments like that, and then they found some arm bones and the jaw here, and then a thigh bone. And then the team spent the next 3 weeks actually doing a full excavation, trying to locate the rest of the pieces of the skeleton, which then led to the discovery of the rest of these pieces that you see here. And they named it Lucy, as we all know. Well, I don't know that we all know this, but they named it Lucy because they had a tape player in the camp and they were playing Beatles songs and they were playing Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds the night they were excited about finding this. So they named it Lucy.
Yeah.
Once it was completely excavated, then the bones were taken to Cleveland, of all places, Cleveland, Ohio. They took it there, and the next 9 years they spent cleaning the bones and stabilizing them and basically putting all the pieces together. And then they were returned to Ethiopia, where they were found after that. And then Johanson wrote his book in 81, which he called Lucy, The Beginnings of Humankind, which kind of made the skeleton very, 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 very famous.
Okay, so sum it up. What do we have here? We have a partial skeleton.
We do. Partial skeleton of basically a single creature. We have, pieces from one individual creature.
Okay, so let me ask you another question.
Yes.
How do we know that this is all from one individual? That's a crucial question.
It is a crucial question. And that's a crucial question just in general. I mean,
Yeah.
lay aside all the creationist skepticism about what's on the table here.
Yeah.
It is really important to know that you're dealing with a single individual. So how do you
Right.
know that? Well, one of the reasons we think this comes from an individual, a single individual, is the localized nature of the find, right? So they excavated the area, they found these bones, and then they just didn't find any other hominin bones there. So that suggests that this is one deposit at least.
Okay.
And then you can look at the individual elements and you realize they're all kind of proportional to each other. We don't have anything that's unusually large with respect to some other portion of the body. They all seem to be of similar size and proportion. So you can see here, for example, if we look at the two elbows here from the humeri, they're about the same size.
Yeah.
So that gives you some confidence that this is probably from the same individual. Another thing, we don't have duplicated elements.
Okay.
That's a big deal because obviously if you found two jaws, you'd think, oh, well,
More than one
that's
individual.
got to be more than one individual, and who knows
Yeah.
which bone goes where. The fourth reason we sort of think they're all together from a single individual is due to the chemistry. So the actual changes that happen when a body decomposes and is buried and eventually fossilizes, those are going to be different depending on the circumstances, right?
Okay.
Depending on what kind of microbes are eating away at the flesh, what kind of chemicals are in the sediments that bury it, and the kind of chemistry that happens during some of these were exposed and surface finds, so there's some chemical weathering that's taking place. And they're all basically the same appearance. So you put all those together and you think this is likely to be from a single individual. I wouldn't have any real objections.
Okay. Now, I have heard a story that Lucy's knee was found 1.5 miles away
Yep.
from the rest of the bones.
I have heard this story.
And so, are you really sure that all of these fragments come from one individual.
Right.
In that case.
Yes, that story of Lucy's knee has been going around for a long time, at least since basically the 80s when Johansen was promoting the discovery. So let me ask you, first of all here, a knee is formed from sort of the bottom of your thigh bone and the top of your shin.
Yep.
And then there's a kneecap on top of it. That's basically a knee joint. Now, tell me, which knee are we talking about here in the Lucy skeleton that was found a mile and a half away?
Okay, so we have here part of the knee on the left side.
Yep.
Because we've got the lower part of the femur.
That's right.
So that's kind of half a knee.
That's right.
And then on the right side, we've got the top half of the shin bone.
Right.
Which is another half a knee.
Correct.
So we, as far as I can see here, we don't have a complete knee.
Right.
So I don't know what knee they're talking about being found a mile and a half away. We have two half knees.
We have two half knees. And so, when creationists tell me very confidently that Lucy's knee was not found with Lucy's skeleton, it's really awkward to me because there is no complete knee. The knee is completely missing. Not completely, but there's no complete knee to the Lucy skeleton. Now, what you're describing is in fact a known documented discovery. There was another location that is about a mile and a half away, and about the place where the knee was found is about 200 feet deeper on the stratigraphic range. If you trace the strata along, you'll find that it's much deeper than the Lucy skeleton. It's called AL129.
Yeah.
And I have here
got a picture,
a photograph that we can look at. Here it is. This is the knee. And it is a right knee. See that? Right knee.
Yep.
This is from a book. We will include a link to this in the show notes so people can go out and buy this book. It's pretty great if you're looking for photographs of original fossils. But anyway, here's Lucy's knee, AL129. And it's found a mile and a half away, 200 feet deep, and no one ever claimed that knee was in fact the knee that goes to this skeleton. What they claimed was that it was the same species.
Okay.
So, for some reason, there was a creationist in the 1980s that picked up on this knee thing and started telling people that the knee was found far away, and it's obviously some sort of scientific con job. But no one ever said that it was part of the knee. And you can see, since it's the right knee, you've already got the right shin bone there. So it can't be from this skeleton.
Yeah.
And if you had the left knee, you'd know it's not from the skeleton either because we've got the bottom of the thigh bone from the left.
Yeah.
So that story is mistaken. And I'm sorry if you've always gotten a charge out of telling people that story. It's unfortunately incorrect.
Yeah. So it's a product of kind of confusion that then has just been sort of retold and become a bit of mythology.
And the unfortunate thing is you can just look at the photograph and say, there isn't a knee.
There isn't a knee.
There isn't a complete knee anyway.
Yeah. Yeah. So don't use that argument, kids. So
yes, kids.
Yeah. So
I'll do it.
So maybe then I can say you've kind of persuaded me then that all of these fragments belong to one individual. So,
well, they don't.
Oh,
I've executed a little bit of trickery on you. I'm sorry. This piece right here, this tiny little piece right here, is in fact it's a neck bone. It's a cervical vertebrae from a baboon.
From a baboon?
Yes.
Okay.
This was discovered in 2015. Well, it was announced in 2015. I don't know exactly when they've realized what it was, but it was announced in 2015. Now, obviously, creationists love it when these kind of errors creep into the scientific record, because it seems to suggest that, this is all just speculation. But here's the thing. Even when they excavated it, they realized the opening there is very, very small compared to the opening on these other complete vertebrae.
Yeah.
So they thought, that's really strange. And they noticed also that the chemical weathering, the surface weathering, was different on this bone than on the rest of the skeleton. So they thought, well, it was found with the rest of it. That suggests that it's part of it. It's not a duplicated element. So, you can see the bone in all the famous published photographs. But in fact, it's only recently that we realized, they were right. It's a different color, it's a different chemistry, it's a different size, and it's actually from a baboon, and it's not.
Okay.
It's not from this creature.
Yeah, so I guess a lot of people then, that kind of casts some shade for that.
Sure.
And so they want to then say, well, look, now I'm confused. How we've already said, at least one of the bones is not from the same individual. So how can we be sure about all of the rest of it? Doesn't this just cast a lot of doubt about the whole thing?
Yes and no.
Okay.
On one level, there's a certain amount of healthy skepticism that we should have for anything, right? Mm-hmm. We shouldn't be gullible. We shouldn't just take people's word for it.
Yeah.
That's in fact the core of science, right? Mm-hmm. That is the nature of science. We don't just take people's word for it. We go and do experiments and find out. But at the same time, the issue of the size, the issue of the duplicated elements, the small geographic range where these pieces were all found, and the chemical weathering and the chemical transformations of the individual pieces, that all suggests that they are from a single individual. And yes, this one got in by accident, but we knew it was weird. We knew it was too small. We knew it wasn't the right chemistry, but it was found in the same place and it was a non-duplicated element. So people thought, all right, we'll include it. Now, I think what this goes to is this whole question of, some creationists seem to think that we have to know things with biblical certainty, as if they were inerrant before we accept them as real or as reasonable working hypotheses. And I just don't live in that world, right? When we're done here and we clean up and I get in my car there and drive to my home, I'm not going to worry about whether I get there. It's a nice day out. It's not bad weather. I know how to drive. I've driven home many times. And I trust most of the drivers that I encounter also want to get home safely, so they're going to follow the traffic rules. So no, I don't know that I'm going to go home safely, but there's enough good reason for me to think that's fine and get behind the wheel of a very dangerous machine that could kill me. Yeah. But I'll do it because I ain't walking home. It's hot out. So be skeptical.
Yeah.
That's good scientific practice, but don't be weirdly skeptical and just reject everything because some scientist said it. That's just unnecessary.
Yeah. So we should be skeptical, but not kind of hyper skeptical. Yeah. Unreasonably skeptical.
You'd be non-functional if you wanted to
exactly
go around like that.
Yeah. Okay. So have you got any more tricks up your sleeve before we kind of move on?
No, I'm done. I'm done messing around with you. No more trickery. This, as far as we know, is a real skeleton of a real creature.
Okay. So having we've
eliminated the little
odd man
bone that doesn't go there.
Yeah. Okay. So then let's move on to what this skeleton means. Let's think about that.
All right.
So I guess the first thing that I would say about it, just looking at the skeleton, is it's quite small. Assuming you've kind of laid it out. The bones look quite small and you've laid it out to sort of roughly show the proportions, I think.
Yeah.
So quite small.
Yes. So she would have been about 1.1 meters tall, or
Okay.
maybe 3.5 feet.
Okay. I was going to say, what's that in real money? So three and a half feet.
3.5
yeah.
feet, 40, what is that, 42 inches? 42 inches, something
Yep.
like that.
Okay.
And we've discovered many other remains of her fellow species members, and she turns out to be kind of small even for Lucy's species. So that's kind of an interesting thing to note here, that this skeleton is kind of tiny.
Okay. So, does that mean that she's a juvenile? I mean, is she, not fully
Excellent
grown?
question. There's a couple of things that we can point to sort of investigate whether she's a juvenile. One thing, the easy one, is the mandible here. So if we look on the mandible here, we see 1, 2, 3 molars.
Okay.
So her third molar is fully emerged, fully erupted, as we say. And that's something that happens, in late puberty, early adulthood. So
Okay.
that suggests that she's an adult. We can also look at the teeth that are preserved with their crowns, and we see there's quite a bit of wear on the teeth, so that suggests that she's been chewing on things for a while. And we can also look at long bones here. So if I take this thigh bone here, the way these bones grow is that you have a shaft that is bone, and then there is the top of it is also bone, and in between there is a little cartilage bit.
Okay.
And that cartilage is gradually replaced with bone, and eventually it fuses together and forms a solid piece of bone. So if you find a juvenile skeleton, a real juvenile skeleton, you will find there's a growth plate there. And these parts, the ends of the long bones will be loose. And that's not what's the case here. You can see those bones pretty much wherever you pick up one of the long bones, you can see the end is completely attached. So that's also another little indicator that we have an adult. So she's 3.5 feet tall, and she's basically a grown-up.
And she's basically grown-up. Okay. The other thing that strikes me is you've kind of laid the bones out here on the table, is that there aren't very many bones. Now, I've heard, again, I've kind of read in the literature, she's about 40% complete.
Yeah.
Is that correct? Is that right?
I've seen that figure. I tried to figure out where, I looked up the original science papers, scientific articles that describe the skeleton, trying to figure out how they came up with the 40% figure, and it doesn't say. It just says she's 40% complete. Now, I should say before we get started with this explanation that I have not put the ribs out.
Right, okay, that's...
I am familiar enough with anatomy that I can say, oh, this is the distal humerus and this is the proximal ulna and so forth. I don't even want to start figuring out where the ribs go. So I have the ribs in a bag, but I never put them out. So they're missing. So there's more to the skeleton than just what we have here. So if you think about redundancy, if you think about the number of bones in a human body and the kind of redundancy that there would be, or an ape body for that matter, you don't need, for example, both halves of the pelvis here because it's symmetrical on the other side. You don't need both leg bones. You don't need every bone from the arm. You just need one to know what the other side should look like.
Yeah.
The only bones that are not duplicated like that are down the axis of the body, the axial skeleton.
Mm-hmm.
But even accounting for that, I get about 25 to 30% complete when I think about, this element is represented sufficiently to understand what it is. So I don't really know where he got the bones, the 40% figure, but ultimately, I'm not sure that it matters that much, given that it's just a number. Who cares? It's kind of like saying, we're 99% identical to a chimpanzee.
Right.
That sounds scary. Oh, or genomics is so ape-like, but what does that even mean
Yeah.
And there's plenty of creationist work that contests that, and yet it's just a number.
Yes, just a number.
It's just a number.
And I guess the other thing to say about this is that, however, whether it's 40% complete or whatever, this is an exceptional skeleton.
Yeah.
Because although we don't have much of the skull, the cranium, we do have crania for other Australopithecine skeletons. And what we do have here is a lot of the postcranial skeleton. In other words, everything from below the neck, from the neck down. And that's quite exceptional. And you can get some important clues about all kinds of things, which we're going to come on to talk about, from the postcrania. So this is an exceptional skeleton.
Yes,
for those reasons. Yeah. So that brings us on then to what can we learn about this skeleton. So my next question is, how different is this from a modern human skeleton?
All right, there are lots and lots of difference. We can start sort of at the top and work our way down, I guess. So the mandible here, the tooth rows here are not exactly parallel, but they're a lot more parallel than ours. Ours are more shaped like a U. Well, not like a U, it's more like an arc.
Yeah.
So it's much more wide. It's wider in the back, and this is much narrower.
Kind of more V-shaped.
Yes.
Yeah.
There's the front of the mandible here does not have a chin. We have this funny little bulgy bit at the bottom of our mandibles where it just sort of sticks out, and that's another difference there. Let's see, the thoracic vertebrae here, the body of the vertebra tends to be smaller proportionally, and they tend to be oblong shaped. Ours are not like that. So this is ours are much thicker, and the opening is not nearly the same proportion. This opening is much larger in Lucy. Let's see my notes here. What else have I got? The finger bone here. This is an easy one. You can see that finger bone there, Paul.
Yep.
You can see the top of the bone is quite curved.
Yeah.
And that is not present in human finger bones. Our finger bones are straight as an arrow along the top.
Okay.
So that's another difference. We can look at going down. We can also notice the thigh bone here. The neck, which is this part, is longer and narrower.
Okay.
And the head is smaller. So the cup that fits the ball and socket joint, this part here that's called the acetabulum, is proportionally much smaller on this bone than it would be in a human being.
Okay.
And a toe bone also has a curvature that our bones don't have.
Yeah.
That's a tiny toe bone.
Oh yeah, you can see how curved
It's
that is.
quite curved, and our bones don't curve like that. Our bones
Yeah.
are pretty straight.
Yeah.
So there are lots and lots of differences between this skeleton and what we would think of as a human skeleton.
Okay. So lots of differences, but I kind of sense that there's more to the story than that. So, so how should I formulate this question? So you hear people say Lucy's just an ape. Okay, creationists who say Lucy's just an ape. Is that right? Is she just an ape? Don Johansen and obviously his colleagues, his evolutionary colleagues, said this is a human ancestor. So, I mean, why are they saying that?
Yeah.
If this is, has all these differences from a modern human. So, so kind of help us sort of understand that.
Okay, so yes, I've heard people say that it's just an ape. With respect to being just a modern ape, we can rule that out really, really easily.
Okay.
One of the things that you find, for example, in a modern ape is the canine teeth are enlarged and they stick way up above the tooth row. And here on the mandible, there's just no evidence that that would have taken place on this specimen.
Okay.
The teeth, the crowns all have a basically flat profile. They don't, there's nothing that juts up like a modern ape, and even where it's missing, we can see the tooth socket really wouldn't be big enough for there to be a really large.
And you see that if you look at a modern ape like a gorilla,
it's really obvious.
and it's really obvious they have those kind of big fangs,
huge big fangs. Yeah. So that's a pretty big difference between this skeleton and that one. Here is this piece is called the sacrum. This is one of the better preserved pieces of the Lucy skeleton, and we can see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 fused vertebrae that are the sacral vertebrae that form the single bone of the sacrum. And on modern apes, the sacrum is 6, I believe.
Yeah, 6.
6.
Yeah.
So that's another difference. The femur here, the bottom of the femur is angled, and it's hard to see in the non-reconstructed version because it's all broken, but there's definitely an angle there, and you can see it on the tibia. If you hand me that tibia there, the surface, the articulating surface here, where the femur would end up, is roughly in line with the shaft of the tibia.
Okay.
Whereas in a chimpanzee, it's displaced quite dramatically to the back of the bone. So it's quite different. So from top to bottom, it is not a chimpanzee. It's not just a chimpanzee. It's not just a modern ape. But, whether it's a human ancestor or not, it kind of depends on what you think a human ancestor would be and whether you think evolution is true.
Okay, so Lucy is not just a chimpanzee. She's not just a modern ape. She has some ape-like features, but she also has these other features that are different from modern apes.
Yep.
I did just want to talk about the pelvis a bit more because, again, I've heard stories about the reconstruction of this pelvis.
Yes.
And you can see that this is there's some distortion to this. So tell me the story about this.
All right. So the story is fairly simple. This is the pelvis. As when these pieces were broken off in the original discovery, this opening here was not present.
Okay.
Fully formed. So they put that back together.
Yeah, and you can see the fractures. I think they're
you can. You definitely can. And so this is not exactly how it was found, but they do fit together like a puzzle. And so you pretty much see that's how they have to go together. I mean, that's basically how it works. Now the sacrum here would articulate with this bone like so.
Okay.
Which is pretty terrific. There's a problem, and that's a pretty straightforward problem. This part of the bone here is called, eventually it would join with the other half of the pelvis to form something called the symphysis pubis. Mm-hmm. And it has to meet in the middle.
Okay.
And you can see, just looking at it, as I articulate the sacrum here with the pelvis, you draw a line down the middle.
Not going to meet.
That's not going to make it.
No.
So we can tell, before we know anything about this animal, or what it was like, or this creature, or what it was like, this hip bone can't be right. It has to be over farther, like this, which means that somehow there's something wrong, because this fits in really nice. That articulates like a piece of jigsaw puzzle, but it's not correct down here. So something up here is broken. And then when we flip it over, sure enough, you can see this this part is nice and smooth, and then it seems to be weirdly, jaggedly distorted here. And that weird, jagged distortion, that's part of the problem. You can also see as you look at this, because it's a cast of the original, you can see the cracks where this thing was broken. So it needed to be basically taken apart and refused.
This is what I've heard. Okay,
yes.
so
and there's a famous video from like a Nova special, I think, where Oxnard, I believe, is explaining or Lovejoy, I guess it was.
Owen Lovejoy.
Owen Lovejoy, that's right. He was explaining about this, and he's literally got like a rotary cutter, and he's cutting away at this cast and gonna put it back together. And it gets shown a lot at creationist meetings, and everybody has a good laugh about it, like these guys are just
kind of faking the whole thing.
Cheating!
They're cheating.
They're just breaking it apart and
putting it back together however they want it to be.
But you can see, you can see when you have this cast of the original find,
there's something wrong here.
There's something wrong.
Right.
It couldn't, the two halves of the pelvis can't meet. They have to be, there must be something wrong there. You can see the broken distortion there. That's definitely something that's wrong.
Yeah.
And so, we can talk about what is the proper reconstruction. That's sure. But whether there was going to be a reconstruction or not, that's kind of.
So that's my next question. So, okay, fair enough. We understand that some reconstruction is necessary. How do we know that Owen Lovejoy reconstructed it correctly? How do we know that he wasn't just trying to make it look more human than it really is, let's say?
Because we have other copies of these bones.
Okay.
So before Lucy was discovered, we knew there were very complete pelvic bones found in South Africa. Now, that's far away from Ethiopia, but there have been a lot of bones down there that have been found that are quite similar, much more similar to the skeleton than this skeleton resembles a modern human skeleton or a modern chimpanzee skeleton. So that is the southern ape. That's where Australopithecus, the name southern ape, comes from. And they call it Africanus from Africa. This one's called Afarensis, which is from Afar, which is the region where it was found. And those pelvic bones are not distorted like this. And so we can compare Lovejoy's reconstruction here with those pelvic bones and see it's pretty good.
Okay.
It's not too bad.
Okay.
So it's not that he took a human pelvis and said, let's make it more human. He had other pelvic bones to compare it to. And so it's not wildly incorrect, nor is it wildly biased in favor of human evolution.
Right, okay.
It is what it is.
Okay. So that then brings me to my next question, which is what does the pelvis actually tell us? Once that reconstruction has taken place, do we have a pelvis in Lucy that looks like a chimpanzee's pelvis or one that looks like a modern human pelvis?
It's kind of doing its own thing.
Okay.
It's not entirely, it's definitely not flat like a chimpanzee pelvis would be. But it's not really bowl-shaped, not fully bowl-shaped like our pelvis is. It's still kind of flared outward. So it's kind of doing its own thing. So it's neither one. Okay,
so here's the tricky question. So does this mean then that it is an intermediate, that this is exactly what you expect to see in an evolutionary transition?
It's kind of a loaded question, I think.
Yes.
Yeah. The chimpanzee pelvis is fairly unique as far as ape pelvic bones go. Chimps are knuckle walkers. That is if you look at the variety of ape skeletons that we have in the fossil record, that turns out to be a rather unusual form of locomotion. Mm-hmm. So it's got a weird pelvis that's suited to doing that. Mm-hmm. And then in a lot of respects, Lucy's pelvis looks more like a human pelvis.
Okay.
But it isn't human. It's really its own unique thing. Mm-hmm. And I know that's not a very satisfying answer because it really doesn't address that raw anxiety. Is this really a human?
Yeah.
A human ancestor thing.
Yeah. Okay. Well, yeah, that's kind of an unsatisfactory kind of note to end on, but we're sort of running out of time for this episode. But we're going to come back to this next time. So we're going to have a second episode because I think there's lots more that we can say.
Yeah.
Probably we should just kind of recap, as we sort of close out this episode. So Lucy was discovered 1974 by Don Johansen and his colleagues. She's small. What did you say? About 3.5 feet?
3.5 feet.
Something like that. So she's quite small. She's got some features which are ape-like, some features which are more human-like, and some which are kind of their own unique thing.
Yeah,
as you were saying.
Unique thing. Yeah.
We've sort of talked a little bit about the pelvis. We've talked a bit about her knee in particular. And cleared up some things about those, which I think is quite helpful.
And bones that don't belong.
Bones that don't belong.
Not
the
part
little
of Lucy.
The little odd man out there. But we've only just now got to the crucial question, I think, which is this question of evolutionary transition.
Yeah.
So that's where we're going to leave it for now. We're going to leave you on that cliffhanger.
And
we're going to
come back for part 2.
We're going to come back to that in part 2.
We'll put it up in 2 weeks from now. You don't have a long wait to wait. But frankly, if you know about what my work is and what I've done over the years, you already know what the answer is going to be. So hopefully you're not living in terrible anxiety for the next 2 weeks.
Yeah, I mean, this is Let's Talk Creation after all.
Yeah.
So we'll leave it there. This has been a fun episode.
Yeah.
I've learned a lot about Lucy as we've talked about this, and it's great to have the cast here. Don't forget to like and share our episodes, subscribe, tell your friends about us, and make sure you're back here in 2 weeks' time for part 2 of talking about Lucy. So we'll see you then in a fortnight.
See you around.
Bye for now.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Let's Talk Creation. For more information, visit us at letstalkcreation.org, where you'll find an archive of past episodes and all our show notes. If you'd like to leave a comment or make a suggestion, you can find us on all the major social media platforms. Let's Talk Creation is brought to you in the U.S. by Core Academy of Science and in the U.K. by Biblical Creation Trust. As a listener-supported ministry, we are grateful for all of your financial support. Find out how you can make a contribution at our website, letstalkcreation.org. Also remember to like, subscribe, and share this episode with your friends. Thanks, and see you next time.